Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Sean Vasquez.
And we are two artists reaching into the pile of movies, games, art in general. And
to see what's worth taking with you.
And today, on the Warp Shelf, we are back from summer vacation. So, guys, welcome back. Thank you for being patient with us during this time of having a few weeks off. But it felt nice to, take a break, actually do some summer things, But now that we're back, we're trying to do the right thing. Sorry, that's the last one. I promise that's the last one. We are doing Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. We are doing more of our AFI Top 100 list. And both me and Deshaun got that Criterion right here. That Criterion collection, which, by the way,
how fucking nice is this box?
This is so fucking nice. I'm so glad I bought this separate. Like I was like, Deshaun already owns it. I don't need to buy it. And then I was like, I should buy it for myself. This is so nice. It's an extremely nice edition of this movie. I'm glad I watched it this way because, of course, the best part about any Criterion is that they worked with Spike Lee to really remaster this and get all the materials together for this special edition and really just go all out and make it the best edition of Do the Right Thing that's out there. And that's fucking awesome. If you love physical media and you're not buying Criterion stuff, come on.
You tend not to only get the best transfers, plus Blu-rays just have a better quality.
Yeah, because DVDs went up to 720p if you guys didn't know, and Blu-rays can go 1080p and above, and even to lossless files. So it's just no, that's not right, not lossless. But they can do they do so much more than DVDs that it's so worth it to do the upgrade to Blu-rays.
And
it's
even
not
as good as streaming services are, there is still a bit of compression when you stream a high quality movie.
Yeah, because you don't realize that it is streaming to you, even if you're getting 4K or what Disney Plus says IMAX format, and you're like, IMAX? No. you're like that's not what's happening here. You're like, I love you, Disney Plus, but we're all lying to ourselves when we say that. But because they're just like, we filled the screen, and you're like, ooh. You're like, you did it, guys.
As we continuously notice, people have no idea how aspect ratios work, so I'm sure it'll blow some normies' minds.
I mean, the first time I threw on, it was Shang-Chi. That was the first one I watched in IMAX, or was it Black Widow? Because we bought back Black Widow, so that was our first IMAX on TV. Sure, it fills the screen. It's definitely a high quality, and they're using the transfer of the IMAX film. Does that make it better? Yes. Does it make it actually IMAX?
No.
No, I think you do have to see it on a big screen to count. I know we're getting in a diatribe here, but Do the Right Thing, a Spike Lee joint, is a movie that me and Deshaun watched and got deep on in college. It was one of our program. It was in the syllabus. We watched it in class, and then we kind of took it apart and talked about it. So it's one of those movies that we have gotten real deep on before and have done very deep discussions on. So I'm really excited to talk about this because it really is a fantastic movie. There's a reason why it's on AFI's Top 100 list. There's no question in my mind. I'm almost upset it's not lower, on this number list, because what are we at, 96? Come on, that's the only problem with this AFI list. I think we'll go down the list and we're like, why the fuck is this above this? You're just you're like, wait a minute, why is it like this? But so Do the Right Thing is definitely one of my favorite movies. It's definitely going to be a little tough for us to talk about, of course, because we are not black, but we will try our best to be the most sensitive and open and really try to talk about what's going on in this movie.
There will be a point later on that I do want to get into as far as like the crossover between like Black and Hispanic culture,
Yes,
especially
of
if you
course.
lived in New York.
Yeah.
Because I actually had a long talk with my mom about it because she grew up in Brooklyn when she was a kid.
Really?
And I talked about like the accuracy of Do the Right Thing as far as like the way Brooklyn was portrayed. And she went on this like 20-minute rant of like how accurate it was and how each of those like archetypes always existed.
Yes, I want to say that's probably my favorite thing about Do the Right Thing is how real life it feels while also being just a straight up play. I love, one of my favorite things about Do the Right Thing is it feels like a stage play. Like it feels like even from the beginning with the boxing opening of what's her name?
Perez.
Rosie doing the boxing opening. That feels like kind of an opening number, you know? Like it feels like they're playing the overture of the movie because they play that song over and over again in this movie, which I love.
Also,
I think
name a better opening credit sequence.
Yeah, no, it's seriously just awesome. And it's one of those things that like the rest of the movie plays out like a play. We just kind of follow our main character around, Spike Lee around for a day in the life of the neighborhood, and there's all these side characters and interjection. It feels like an old stage play, like almost leather and lace-ish in a way, you know, like it's funny in that aspect where you know the whole time things are gonna go wrong, you know, like things are going to build up, very Shakespearean in a lot of aspects, and that's one of my favorite parts about it is that like Spike Lee can get to that nitty-gritty of what life is like actually there, but also have this kind of theatrical feel to it.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
You know,
but it also feels authentic because they actually shot in Bed-Stuy.
Yes, I think the other thing that gives it more of that play feel is the high contrast cinematography that's going on. Shots are, when they're cut together, there's such contrast, but also big ensemble shots sometimes, you know, like where it's showing the Greek chorus of those of the what do they call them, stoop rats, the group of kids who just like scream and yell on the the whole time when they pop into things, and it's like they are just the Greek chorus of this story, and of course Spike Lee is our Greek tragedy hero here, you know, like because pay no mind, this is a tragedy. Do the Right Thing is straight up a tragedy happening in front of your eyes, you know, like there's no other way around it, and it feels Greek in that aspect, you know, like you're just like it's gonna happen, you know, like it's like Odysseus, you're like, you know, it's all gonna go fucking wrong, you know, like you're like, it ain't going well for this motherfucker, you know, like but it's also that, speaking about the cinematography, it's lots of bright lights to show off that it's hot and that the sun is beating down on these characters, and I'm sure it actually felt like they were out and super serious because they like those are some hot like hard lights, you know, hitting them, and it's like that must have been boiling to be under the whole time. So I'm sure he didn't have to fake the sweating that all the characters are doing on set there, you know, like you're just like, dang. But not only is it like that, they do these big dynamic shots and lots of Dutch angles to really show things are going wrong, that things are not right, you know, like that there is a certain rhythm to the life here, and when things go wrong, it's like a fucking record scratch, you know, like it's just like, you know, right off the fucking record, you're just like but I know we're kind of jumping around. We're always jumping around. That's the Warp Shell podcast.
Always.
But
this is why we have bullet points.
This is why we have bullet points. But I think that it's important to bring up its play-like nature and its cinematography right away, because I think that's that's some of the parts that I admire the most about this movie. Absolutely. Definitely, I knew you would love is little Esposito, I'm mispronouncing his name.
Giancarlo Esposito.
Esposito,
Little
thank you.
Esposito at an early point in his career before he was typecast as villain after villain after villain because he.
I mean, he's sort of a villain here, you know, like he's obviously
antagonistic.
And thank you so much.
But Bugging Out is also a completely different type of character to like
Yes.
Gus Fring, or basically
Yes.
every character he's played since Gus Fring, which has just been diet Gus Fring.
It's true. It's like, it was funny though, because I'm watching it and I'm like, and it almost took like me a second to be like, wait a minute, I know that man, you know, like, and I know it's been a while since I rewatched it, so it's one of those things that I was rewatching and I was like, oh my god, it's Esposito. Like, it was like, well, what the fuck? He's in this, and he's so young and nerdy in this. It's so cute, you know, like in a looking back way, you know, like it's just so cute to see him small and teenager-ish.
He has a really interesting tidbit on the making of stuff.
Yes.
For this, because he talks about how he is half Italian, and so there's like that interesting dynamic about like the racism between both.
I will say that it's like I may not be black, but you're Hispanic and I'm Italian, so we do have some say in this story. I feel like, you know, like it's like we may not be the storytellers here, but we are part of what's being told of like these first immigrants, you know, like, because that's really another thing going on here, is that this is. And it especially comes to the head when, you know, when the riot finally goes down and they're about to trash the Chinese market, and she goes, and the Chinese market guy goes, I'm black too, you know, like, and they laugh at him, but then they kind of let him off a bit. Is that like, it's funny because it's just immigrants being moved around, you know, like it's like these Italians came in and they think that, you know, like that the blacks are coming in to take over their neighborhood when they took the neighborhood from like the Irish and the Polish, and and then you think more, it's like, you know, like now you have the Chinese coming in to take the neighborhoods of Brooklyn and everywhere, and it's just kind of one of those things that like, this is what happens, is that new groups of people come in and they try to live here, and the problem is that people feel like this is their home, you know, like this is where they're from, this is their stoop, this is their road, this is their pizza place, you know, like it's theirs, and they feel defensive of it, and it's one of those things that like, even no, it's just other people trying to live their lives, people get so angry about something being taken away from them, you know, like, and especially when it feels like your culture's being taken away from you, you know, like, but I think it's funny when with the Chinese market guy at the end, because it's such an encapsulating scene of like, if white is just a definition, you know, because I think I brought it up on the podcast before, the letter from Benjamin Franklin saying that the Dutch aren't white and you shouldn't trust the Dutch. That's an official letter. Go read it. Benjamin Franklin sending it out to the being like, hey, don't trust the Dutch. They're not white. And you're like, what are they then? you're like, what the fuck? You're like, Dutch are the definition of white. What the fuck? But that's the thing, is that white's a definition that's applied to this like class of people that they want to include, you know, like these people are white and they're okay, so they stay with us, you know, like is kind of it.
There's been that conversation before. I can't remember where I had heard it, but it was a conversation about like biracial children, just like, oh, why is it when a kid is biracial, like they're immediately put up as just like they're black first?
Yeah.
And the response was just like, well, you were the guys who propped white all the way the fuck up here, so you're the one who made the distinction to begin with.
It's kind of
like, hang on, this whole operation was your idea.
It's kind of like when you get down to like a lot of sexism, it's that men think that males are the default humans and that women are just like an added thing, you know, like same thing as a lot of racists will be like, they'll be like, white is default human and everything else is just added people and they're not people, you know, like you're like fuck off. Like
that's something that even I ran into like writing the book, is that without even thinking about it, when it was characters who were non-white in the book, you would go into descriptions of like the specific tone of their skin or like specific features. But then I realized you wouldn't do that as much for the white characters because in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, they're just white.
Yes.
That's the default. You don't need to get into it.
And it's a bias that's like built into our culture a little bit.
Yeah.
And we need to be conscious of that shit. So that way we don't do basically microaggressions like that, you know, like where you're like, like, it's just like a soft jab at somebody. And that's not cool. You know, like that's just fucked up. And I think that, you know, like, it's interesting because I was saying they were defining white and then they're like defining black later, and I think that's even it's like it's funny, this response to labeling each other, you know, like as an in group or an out group, or you know who deserves to get their fucking place burnt down because they're against somebody, you know, like you're just like it's interesting, and it's like it's something that's real, you know, like I felt like that was a very real moment in that scene. I mean, most of that, the whole riot scene is too real. You're just like, shit. But to kind of get back into the plot, one of my I keep saying one of my favorite things, but there's lots of favorite things about this movie. I already said it, is that the buildup to this is incredible. I know a lot of stories do like a hot day and everyone's boiling up to like, because they're getting upset because they're hot, you know, like no movie does it better than this though. No movie does like a hot day better than fucking Do the Right Thing, you know? Like, you're like, Jesus. Like,
it's very accurate because the heat fucking sucks. I get into like petty arguments about this with Rob all the time, where it's just like, because he hates the cold with a passion. It's just like, here's statistically why summer is worse. Just like summer makes people more irritable. In the winter, you can put on...
right. Sorry, I think you went in and out there. Did I lose you? Yeah, I lost you. All right, we had some issues there.
Yep.
But we're back. You can hear us now.
Yes.
And Deshaun was saying that statistically, hotter's worse.
Summer is worse than the winter because more accidents happen. You have more risk of like actual fires. It makes people angrier, so people are prone to more violence as opposed to the winter. And with the winter, you can just add layers, whereas the summer, you can only take so many. You could be down to your underwear or completely naked in your own house and still just be sweating like a pig, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I think it's also that like. Yeah, like certain people are just sweaty, you know, like, and I think especially Italians and Hispanic people are very sweaty, you know, like it's like it just is part of who we are, and it's just one of those things that like we just turn into fucking sweat balls, and that is just unfucking comfortable, you know, like, and you're just like, no, I don't want that. Like, I'm definitely against the cold, but I'm more of I want it to be like 70 and nice. I don't want cold or hot. I just want fucking nice.
But the worst like the cold ever gets, especially if you're in a well-heated house, is like get a blanket.
Right.
Put on a sweater and some like sweatpants, and oh look, I'm pretty much fine now. As opposed to just like, well, I'm in my underwear and I still stink.
Now I gotta take another shower. Fuck this. Yeah. Like, and they even do that in this movie, that like, you know, they take a shower in the middle of the day because it's so damn hot, you know, like, and you're like, that makes a lot of sense. I fucking understand that, you know, like, you're just like, damn. And AC wasn't like as prevalent, you know. I feel like it's like even just back in the 80s and 90s, like fucking the AC was terrible in comparison to is now. We have like central AC now. You know, some people could just like, and you can just go places and have nice AC. Even here, when they go to Sal's, it's like it's still just like boiling hot in there, and especially more so because they're cooking pizzas. You know, like, and you're like, damn.
I will say this though. we used to have like an old, like probably from the 80s or 70s, like industrial strength AC, and that shit was a workhorse.
That shit cooled shit down.
I don't know like what happened to it, but I think it was literally like one of those ones where like you're supposed to put those in like stores.
Yes.
Like an old one. So like that shit kept the house cool.
When me and Mary first moved together, we bought this off of like Facebook Marketplace or something, this like industrial sized AC unit, and it worked, but it also switched. It would constantly flip the power. We'd like lose power randomly because it was just way too strong. When you're like, shit, in our one bedroom apartment.
Every time
like,
I turn my AC on in my room, like the light flickers for a split second. So you're like, but I'm used to it, and it does it every time, and there hasn't been a problem yet.
I love that. So another thing that I wanted to point out here, because I was saying it's very Greek, it's very Shakespearean in its way, but really another like big callback to this movie, and I think Spike Lee's doing it on purpose, is very West Side Story. You know, like is that it's boiling up. You know, it's a story about immigrants handing off neighborhoods to each other, and you know, like kind of this like natural progression of living here. You know, like is neighborhoods changing hands, and I think that's an interesting comparison. You know, like is that they're both New York stories, and I think that it's I think obviously the original West Side Story was a big influence on culture, and it's like, of course, Spike Lee's sort of referencing it here. You know, like no musical numbers or anything.
It is interesting.
It is a musical in a way.
It is interesting that we talk about the neighborhoods, because I had talked to my mom about it when she was growing up. My mom was born in '73, so she lived in New York when she was a little kid. Like she lived through the 1976 New York blackout.
Wow. Oh shit. That's awful.
Yeah. And well, the way she puts it is that she actually laughs about it, because she's just like, oh, the only thing I remember is that all the lights are off and my father broke into the Howdy Doody factory to steal a bunch of dolls for me. It's just like, that's fucking funny. But she also talks about when she was a kid, the divisions between each neighborhood. Like you stuck to your own neighborhood because you would literally get jumped if you were caught in a neighborhood that wasn't your own.
Yeah, and they kind of show that off here. There's a few times where people are like, what are you doing here? You know, like, what are you up to? You know, like, and immediately want people to leave, you know, like, and you're just like, geez, I especially love the guy who tries to drive through the water, and like, he's like, I'll call the cops. And like, and they're just like, they soak his car, and then they like, nothing happens. They're all just like, it's just great. Exactly. I love that scene. I love
and she also talks about like each of like the minor characters. There was always one of those in the neighborhood. Like she talks about like the mayor as a character. There was always an old man walking around. There always was like Ruby Dee's type of character who's like always watching over the neighborhood as sort of like an elder. Yeah. She talks about like there were so many couples.
I love those characters, by the way. Those are probably some of my favorite characters in this movie, is the mayor and Ruby, because it's just so like, you're right. It feels real, you know, like it feels like that's, yeah, of course, these are the neighborhood characters, you know, like you're like, everyone knows these guys, you know? Like,
yeah. And Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, the two actors playing them, like were already veteran performers before this, like both on stage and film.
Yes. And continues to do so. Some recent work from them I was watching recently. I forget what I was watching recently, and I was like, that's the mayor.
And it's also funny because
wait a minute.
It's also hilarious because they're actually married in real life, and it's fun to see them play foils. Yeah,
that's actually really fun, because it's like that. I think that's their relationship is definitely one of the most like heartwarming things here. You know, like it's like in a movie where a lot of bad shit happens, they're like this bright moment. You know, like, and you're just like, you're like, that's awesome. Yeah, Ossie Davis is, I mean, he's just incredible. It did pass away in 2005, but what was I watching? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find what I was watching, and I was like, hey, I was like, wait a fucking minute. I know that man. Dinosaur. That was the weirdest fucking shit. I decided to watch Disney's Dinosaur the other day, which disappointed me when I was a kid. I saw it on my birthday when I was a child, and I remember being disappointed as a kid and watching it again as an adult.
Because
I was like,
I'm
damn,
sure you were
this
like,
still bad. Like,
I'm sure you were like everyone else and like, yo, this opening scene with no dialogue fucking slaps, and then they start talking.
yes. That's exactly it. I'm sitting there going, damn, this good as hell. And then they start, the monkeys come in.
The whole sequence where like the
Jesus.
egg is traveling. You're like, this is fucking awesome. And then they open their goddamn mouths.
But he's one of the lemurs in that movie, and I was like sitting there being like, the mayor. Like I was like, Jesus, like he's in this. But
yeah, Max Casella's also one of the lemurs, and he's fucking Daxter in the Jack and Daxter games.
Yes, it was funny because I immediately noticed that too. I was like, what the fuck is happening in this movie? Like, I was like, damn, it's not as bad though. I did watch to compare. HBO has Walking with Dinosaurs, which of course is nothing like the actual Discovery Channel show. It's literally them talking, like the dinosaurs fucking talk as they do Walking with Dinosaur stuff. And you're just like, please stop making the dinos talk. The kids don't need the dinos to talk. Like, stop this. like what the fuck?
Dinosaurs are already cool. But as far as like beyond veteran performers, you have so much like new and burgeoning talent. Like we had already brought up Giancarlo Esposito, and this was like one of his earlier movies.
This is a big movie. A big movie for Sam Jackson. This is fucking Samuel L. Jackson's like first big role. He's been in other things, but this is like him having a lot of lines, you know, being a big role, and really where he got like everyone kind of was like, fuck, you know, that guy's great. Let's have him in more shit.
Yeah, the most before that, because this was pre-Pulp Fiction, so you have like a lot of like bit parts, like Together for Days, or like he was the one guy who tried to rob the fucking McArnold's or the McDowells in Coming to America.
Yes. Which, like, a lot of people point at Coming to America as, like, obviously his first big role. But, like, this feels like, you know, he's part of the story. He's saying, he feels like Samuel L. Jackson, you know, not just like, you know, Ryan Gosling in Are You Afraid of the Dark, where you're like, hey, it's Ryan Gosling. you're like, wait a fucking minute. Like, you're like, what are you doing here? And they're like, spooky 90s TV shows.
When
and you're like,
October is starting to come up and we're probably going to do the Halloween movies, you'll feel that with Paul Rudd in Halloween.
Yes, you're like, what the fuck?
Paul Rudd, what the hell are you doing here? Look at you. Look at you.
I mean, it's almost more surprising with Paul Rudd than it is like Johnny Depp in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. You're like, wait a fucking minute, you know? Like you're like, well, Paul Rudd's here. You're a comedy actor. What are you doing here? You know, like at least like Kevin Bacon and Johnny Depp, the like drama. You know, like they were signing up to like do drama. You know, like Paul Rudd is just like, you're like, what?
I don't know. Everyone always gets their start in horror somehow.
Yeah, you know, because it's cheap.
Like we had brought up Giancarlo Esposito. Like this was also John Turturro's like big break.
Yes. Which, by the way, he's always fantastic. He's so hateable in this role. You know, like you're like fuck that dude. You know, like you're like no, but he's like. To be fair, he's like a terrible version of me, basically, you know, like he's a big brother who's like really mean to his younger brother and is of course racist and you're just like, fuck, dude. Like, you're like, don't be this way. But like he's gone on to have an amazing career, and it's like
even in absolute like garbage, he is always a highlight.
Oh, he's always the highlight. The other thing I think is and I mean he did it in the movie before this. Spike Lee was the main character in the movie before this, but he's the main character here, and you know, like that sometimes that can feel like very vanity, you know, like where it's just like, oh yes, of course you're the main, you know, like you couldn't find anybody else. But this feels personal, and he does such a good job, you know, like he's not. It's like he's not weaker than anybody else here, you know, like, which is, I think, a strong part of this.
Yeah, I also think it helps that, like, Mookie as a character isn't, like, a paragon.
Yes. Like, that's the thing about Mookie. He's almost not a good character, you know, like, he's not a good guy. And I think that's also an interesting part about this is that Mookie's
Like,
just trying to get paid.
He's complicated. Like, he's irresponsible. He's kind of a layabout, but he's also someone who does want to work and provide.
Yes.
But there's also definitely like that complex between him and his sister. There's that sort of like envy where like he doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life, whereas like his sister's very book smart and like has ambition.
Yeah.
So there's like that.
I also think it's an important scene when we're talking about Jade, with Sal kind of fetishizing Jade, you know, like being like really into her, and I think that's an important. Sal's an important character here. To be fair, he's the fucking match to this fucking fire here, and really like kind of like starts this whole thing because of his anger and his like deep seated issues about this, because he has a whole monologue about how he owes everything to these people, you know, like and he sort of raises these people, so he has this, of course, affinity and love, but you know, like they do sort of have a point that there's only Italians on the wall there, you know, like, and he's like angry about it when they bring it up, you know, like it's not like he's not like, oh yeah, you know, like we'll get somebody up there, you know, like he's just he's angry about it and gets upset. And it's funny because, of course, later on, the mentally handicapped character, I forget his name, but he puts the Malcolm X and the Martin Luther King picture on the wall finally, because even Sal says it earlier. He's like, who are you gonna put up there? Who you, like, you know, like he's being deliberately demeaning towards a whole fucking race by saying that, you know, like it's fucked up, and it's just like he's being mean, and it's like it's one of those things that like it sounds so complicated because he obviously has this love and he wants to live in this neighborhood, and he wants to like hand down this pizza shop to his kids, and like they all can grow up together.
Well, that's the thing.
But
He
then
doesn't
he's angry.
even. Well, that's the thing. He and his sons don't actually even live in the neighborhood. They just work there.
Right.
Yeah.
He drives in.
Because John Turturro's character like brings that up. He's just like, can't we just open a pizza shop in our own neighborhood? And Sal's just like, there's already a bunch. There's just too much competition over there.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, like it's
interesting. Which is very New York. Like,
yeah,
you gotta, he's like, you better excel, because if you have a shitty pizza joint in New York, you're doing something wrong, because there's at least 12 others you can find on the same block. So you better be doing something.
It's so true. It's so true. I think it's quite interesting though, because he kind of knows it's kind of a shitty pizza joint, but he gets to like shine in this neighborhood, you know. It's like this beacon of like feeding everybody, you know, like and you know, there is a calling to people who want to feed everybody. I think there's I don't think there's anything wrong with like that calling of being like, I want to take care of people and feed them, you know, like that's a literal calling. But it's all twisted in his mind, you know, with just these people that he loves and even fetishizes with Jade. He immediately turns to destroying their shit and fighting them, you know, like, and it's not really, the fight is so wild at the end, because it's like, really all they came in and they're not even doing much, you know, like it is a non-violent protest at the beginning, you know, like it's like they come in, they play loud music, and they demand something that like they spend every day in, you know, like they spend every day at their pizza shop, and like they're just, and I'm not saying that Sal's wrong that he gets to put up whatever he wants, like legally, yes, he could put up whatever he wants in his shop, but like it's not about the legality of it. It's about being a human being. And that's the reality of it. He's not treating others like human beings. Like
that's one of the movie's like major advantages, is that even the more like tragic characters are just people, and they're complicated. And like I had said with Mookie, like no one's an absolute like paragon. No. Like Radio Raheem at the end doesn't deserve to die, but he's also kind of a prick. Which is, and it's also, I
love Radio Raheem.
He's like, he's a prick, but he's that
iconic
guy.
He's iconic.
Yeah, exactly. He's great. And Bill Dunn was fantastic.
I love that character though, because he is the main character. That's what I want to say. Is like Mookie's the main character, but who's got the most main character energy in this entire thing? Who actually, you know, like the whole plot is actually about? It's Radio Raheem. You know, like it's like, yeah, there's all these things going on, but the story is about Radio Raheem. You know, like, and I think that's actually super important because it's a movie about a police violence victim, you know, like it's super important to have like this main character. But you're right, he's not. It's like he's kind of a dick about it, you know. He goes around and he just plays his same song again and again, fight the power, which I kind of love too, you know. Like,
which is apparently, that's another thing my mom had told me about. It's like that was a thing. Like there always was a dude in the neighborhood with a boombox, and they would actually flex on each other by seeing which one had the better boombox. Like that existed.
It's like, thank God that's not a thing now. It would be nerds being like, my PC setup is a lot louder than your
Yo,
PC
check out
setup.
my JBL, bro.
Yeah, right? You're just like, wait a minute. I'm glad that's over. But it's like, even in living in Boston, we saw guys like that on the T, just still standing there with their fucking boombox, blasting it on the T. And like, sure, you're kind of, but there's something to it. Like everyone else around you is like, why are you blasting music? But there's some like, I see why they do it. It's the power. It's like being able to walk into a situation and change the mood, the setting, the fucking soundtrack, you know, like it is main character energy. You come in, you're like, boom, I'm the reason you're all here. You know, like I'm the reason this is happening, you know, like there's a lot of power in the boombox. Like I definitely see it. And that's why I think Radio Raheem stands out so much here. And he's got the best fucking monologue in the whole movie with the love and hate.
With the love and hate. Yeah.
Oh my God. Our teacher lost his fucking mind about that speech when we were in school. And for good fucking reason. It's first off extremely well written. It does feel like a play moment. You know, I bring up more of the like play action of like, here we go, monologue, you know, like we've come up to this character and he's going to tell you something important, you know, like, and I love that moment, but also it's this, it's important to remember that this is a reference to is it Deer Hunter that they have the love and hate from?
I haven't seen Deer Hunter in a while. It
has been a bit since I watched Deer Hunter, but I know the love and hate on the knuckles is a reference to I believe it's Deer Hunter. I could please guys comment down below. We need your help. But I believe it's from there, and they have a whole monologue about what the love and the hate means, and they change it up here to be fitting to what he's talking about here, and I fucking love that shit. It's just incredible. And I think that the thing about, so I've already kind of leaned left and talked about the police thing, but I want to like kind of talk and serious about this, is that like the story, when it boils down to it, is a class story. It's like I was talking about immigrant stories, but it is a class story. I mean, as every story kind of boils down to being. But it's like at the end, it's poor people beating each other up instead of being mad at the weapon of the rich, the police.
Yeah, it's all misdirected anger. Like you get that bit where you see like the three guys sitting down by the wall, and one of them is so mad about like the Asian like. It's like the Asian like shopkeeps just like opening businesses and doing so successful despite not having lived here that long. It's just like, dude, it's not, you shouldn't be angry at them. It's misdirected. You're just in a system that's made to put you down and not let you get anywhere.
Exactly. And it's like, it's one of those things that like the police literally kill a man, then fucking leave, and then just respond to the problem they caused. You know, like they fucking murdered a man and take him away, and then they just kind of come back 20 minutes later going, oh, what happened here? You know, like, and you're just like, fuck you guys. Like they're literally gangsters here. You know, like a lot of people will, and me included, will break down that the police are just armed gangs that like the rich employ to keep their laws intact, you know, like, and it shows here where they don't even really care about the situation of what's going on. They just go in, kill a man, fucking leave, and then go, oh, we got some calls about a riot going on, better go up and fuck more people up, you know, like, and you're just like, they don't even do anything. They don't help anybody. They literally just hurt people. And you really have to question what the fucking point of the cops are when they're out there fucking, that's all they do. You know, like they didn't help in any way. Nobody was arrested in a fine way or to stop it. They just literally just hurt people. And like, how is that okay? You know, like, how is that the function of a societal arm like the police? You know, like, come on.
Yeah, which is why that scene that you had mentioned before of this just like, I'm black is really just a matter of like him not being able to say just like, we're all the same.
We are all the same.
We should all be on the same side. Because there is a lot of like crossover between the cultures. Like I had like tried to put a pin in the thing earlier about like the crossover between like Black and Hispanic culture. Another archetype that comes up a lot that my mom said was definitely a thing was like, Mookie has a Hispanic girlfriend with a biracial son. Yes. That's a thing, especially in New York. Or just when you look at Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic in general.
Yes.
Like, it's a melting pot. Like, Puerto Rico itself, if you're Puerto Rican, if you're a perfect three-way split, then you're Spaniard, African, and Taino Native American.
Right? Like that's it's like that's even more of a mixing pot than, you know, like than most of America is, you know, like, and then they sit there being like, that's not a state. You're like, fuck you. Like, you just don't want to pay for Puerto Rico. Fuck you. You know? Like, sorry. I've been to Puerto Rico a couple times and you could just feel that they just don't want to take responsibility for what they already take responsibility for. So you're just like, you're like, fuck you, make it a state. Fuck off.
And then you also have that sort of internalized racism in certain aspects of like Hispanic culture. Like I really see it with Dominicans, where there's a lot of like African descent in Dominican culture, and they always try to disown it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It comes up a lot. It's really odd.
That is odd. It's like, you know, like I feel like, I mean, you're human, you know, like that's what I feel like. It's like, you know, like it's one of those things that like you shouldn't disown any part of you because you came from it, you know, like somebody spent their whole life building up to you, you know, like you shouldn't be upset about any part of yourself, you know, like in that way. But that's beside the point. But I do want to say that that's the police here, are the only, like, because we were saying, like, everyone's kind of gray, you know, they're not all paragons or good guys or anything like that. The only real bad guys here, because even Sal, you know, like, he's trying to, it's like, he is the bad guy, but, like, no, it's not even Sal, it's his younger son who's the real bad guy. He's the real fucking antagonist. But, like, it's like, the police are the ones who actually kill a man and then hurt people during the riot, you know, like, sure, that they burned down Sal's pizza joint, but it's kind of a reaction to Sal calling in the police to be and killing a man, you know, like basically using the arm of the rich to be able to kill a man, you know, like, and that's just fucked, you know, like that you know, some people can have that also power.
A key moment for Mookie's character, because we were talking about him as a complicated force. There's also a question of subservience with him. And you can tell there's like that vibe around him where it's just like, yeah, dude, I'm just trying to get paid so I can, you know, pay for stuff so I can, you know, help my girlfriend and my kid out. But there's also like that vibe of just like, look at Mookie working for the white dude.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why I think the scene at the end where he tries to pay him and Mookie gives back the money to him is so important, you know, because it's like even Sal there is being offensive, you know, like he's just like, he's like, fine, you still work underneath me, you know, like he's just like, and he's like, no, I make money off of you. You don't, like, no.
And there's also that thing of just like, the insurance is going to help you out anyway. It's just like, I could give a fuck about the money. Just like, yeah, It's nice that you have that.
Yeah, right? It's nice you cannot give a fuck about the money, but obviously everyone else has to, you know? You're just like, fuck. I do want to point out, too, that I think it's interesting. Spike Lee's also saying something about organizing here in this movie, because there's really no organizing, you know? Sorry, what's the character's name for Esposito? It's
Bugging Out.
Bugging Out tries to organize everybody, which of course he's very reactionary. He's reacting to kind of nothing, very surface level problems instead of actual issues that are going on, like protesting the police or something like that. But like it's like he's trying to get everyone organized to help him, and the only person who will help him is Radio Raheem, you know, like, and it's interesting that like all these people who feel like they're part of a group couldn't organize together. And even in the riot scene, it's not very organized, you know, like it's very just reactionary and hurt, you know, like, and and for damn good fucking reason, like you can't just kill a man and then just walk away, you know, like, and that's, especially right in front of a ton of people, you know, like that's fucked. It's just, it's interesting what Spike Lee's saying there, that even in our most in our most angry moments, we will still not come together to organize against these things, you know, like it's just like it's interesting, you know, like and I think it's funny that they use Bugging Out as that character to be like, you know, like that I feel like there's a lot of people who try to organize culture to be able to fight these cultural problems, and it just, people will not come together to do it, you know, like it's just like one of those things that they won't, you know, come out of their lives to organize, you know, like until it's right in front of their faces, like when the riot happens, you know, like, and I think that's interesting, you know, like I think it's something Spike Lee's trying to say there, you know, like, is that we need to be more open to organizing, or we end up in these very intense situations, you know, that lead to destruction, you know, like, and I think that's interesting. But as I say that, a riot is the language of the silenced, and no one was fucking listening to anybody, you know, like, is what it comes down to, is that the riot is like the ultimate, like, no one's fucking listening, so I'll make them listen, you know, type of thing. And I think that's why this Do the Right Things is such an important story, is that it tells a great riot story, you know, like it tells like why this happened, why it came to this moment, you know, like you feel every moment leading up to it, you know, like, and even if before you didn't understand, I feel like watching this, you can like feel the anger. That's why I think, first off, why art is so important. You can like put people into these situations and these mindsets to be able to like talk about these things. And I think that's why Do the Right Thing is first off on this fucking list at all, you know, is that it has a lot to fucking say, you know, like it's not holding back or doing nothing, you know, like, I mean, I watch a lot of movies that don't do much, so it's always amazing to watch something that has a lot to fucking say.
Yeah. And Spike Lee as a director is very broad and can be kind of ham-fisted at points, which is why, to be honest, a lot of his movies are very hit and miss.
Yeah,
but when they
like,
work,
I won't say anything bad against those movies, but they are like, there's just not every one of them is Do the Right Thing, you know, like is basically it.
But it's just one of those things where like when it does work, it like hits like a truck.
Yes. Yeah. I'm totally with you there. You're like, okay, when he gets it right. And I mean, you just look at the other ones that pop up on IMDb's, like what you know him from, Malcolm X. That one's a fucking hitter. She's Gotta Have It, Jungle Fever, you know, like you're just like, it's like, of course. It's absolutely. And I mean, you gotta give him credit too. Spike Lee is one of the most prolific fucking directors we have right now. The man's got 131 credits on for just directing on IMDb. 131. Actor 28. Self, where he showed up just as Spike Lee in something, 288. The man is not afraid to go out and fucking say what he's thinking. Sure, sometimes I think it's a little ham-fisted, but you know, like that doesn't matter. You know, I mean, it does matter, but you know, like it's not always sometimes it's needed to fucking slap.
And he's definitely not the only prolific like artist or creator or just famous person to come out of Bed-Stuy. Like Bed-Stuy is an interesting place in New York where it's actually like brought up a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like Biggie Smalls came from Bed-Stuy, like Jackie Gleason, Jackie Robinson, Mike Tyson, Tracy Morgan. They're all from Bed-Stuy.
and really
Chris Rock.
Yeah, I don't think Spike Lee, and I mean, we're talking about Spike Lee's work here, is that like, I don't think he's lost much steam either. 2022 was the Five Bloods, which was pretty good. I don't think it's I don't think it's like this where you're like, holy fucking shit, you know, like, but it is quite good, you know, like, and in 2022 he's done some commercial work, just like Nike's Seen It All with Colin Kaepernick, but like I think it's something that Spike Lee has made himself a cultural touchstone of, like, you know, like, of being able to talk about these things. I especially love I love little moments with Spike Lee. It's like I love his directing, but also some of my favorite things are like are his like quotes from things. Like they had him on the Oscars, and it was the year that Green Book won. And they go, and the person is interviewing him, and they go, "So why aren't you a big fan of the Green Book?" And he's like, "It wasn't made for me. It wasn't made for me."
The interviewer was British, and he said, "You're British, right?" He's just like, "Let's just say it wasn't my cup of tea."
Fucking lost my shit about that. I was like, oh my God.
I mean, he's taking it like a champ, because the fact that Spike Lee is lost to what is essentially driving Miss Daisy twice must be very fucking irritating.
And yes, it feels like racism because it is racism. You know, like you're like, huh? Like you're like, oh, is this fake you know, platism? You know, like, oh, here's our white savior movie. Let's have that win. You're like, fuck no.
We did it, guys. We solved racism.
We solved racism. And to be fair, Green Book's fine. Green Book's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's got great performances.
It doesn't deserve to win Best Picture, though. Are you fucking with me? Are you fucking with me? Like,
it's a great showcase. It's a great showcase for Mahershala Ali and Viggo Mortensen's like acting prowess. Like,
which, to be fair,
they're great.
I always lift those guys up. Always lift those guys up because they're always great. You know, like you're just like fuck. But it's fucking not it. It's like you're like that ain't it, brother. And I was talking about how like that like nobody has actual power in this situation, you know, like that's the other scary bit here, is that like even though they own this neighbor, you know, like they own this neighborhood, they live here, it's like nobody actually has power to change anything. And even Sal has no fucking power. So when he uses his like no power to like bring in the cops to kill somebody, basically, you're like, fuck, dude, you're just basically stomping on other people who don't have power, you know, like you're just like, it's just like it's more of like the poor hurting each other, you know, like, and it's just sad, you know, like it's just like no, stop class betraying, stop this. especially on a day like this where all anyone is looking for is an escape. Yes.
So like Mookie during his day, he's slacking off, he's talking to people, he goes home and showers, just like bugging out, is really just kind of really hot and irritated and kind of bored and needs something to vent into.
Yeah, you can kind of tell he's bored, you know, like he's like, I need something. I need something to yell about, you know.
You also get like a nice little tidbit, which I'd never caught before, but there is a minor character reading a Black Panther comic. Did you catch that?
Yes, I did. I was like, hell yeah. I did have a Black Panther shirt on, by the way, earlier, and I was like, I can't wear that for this podcast. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Another important thing I want to point out about this plot and the ending violence is that it's really interesting that we talked about the heat and building up these tensions, but the riot and the actual violence doesn't happen until the heat's gone. The sun goes down. It's starting to cool off. It's kind of like once everyone realized the fucking audacity of everybody from the heat, they were like, oh, fuck that. Like they get finally like clear heads and they're like, fuck that. Like people were fucking rude to me, like, and you're just like, or they didn't treat you like human like they do for Radio Raheem and Bug It Out there, like they're not having conversations like they're human, like, or equals, like they're just fucking yelling at each other. But it's like, I think it's funny that like in a movie where it's very built up that the heat is causing all this like this anxiety and build up. It's not until the heat goes away that the fucking complications actually happen. You're just like, damn. And I think that's also it's really cool visually too, because it's like I was saying earlier how the high contrast cuts of like the blue skies behind everybody and the bright bricks of all the buildings and everything. It's like all of a sudden all of that gets subdued by the darkness, and it's like this like kind of like fairy tale Brooklyn that's going on is gone, and it is just these feelings left over, like, and like the reality of the situation. And I think that it's another reason why Do the Right Thing is one of these great all-time movies, is that even visually it's saying these things, like it's nothing's wasted, like, and you're just like, I love that. Every moment is thought out. And you can especially see that when you go through this fucking Criterion collection. It's, first off, I mean, 2 great fucking Blu-rays here, but best of all is this fucking beautiful ass book they include with it, which is just, at first it's a bit of an essay. It's called Walking in Stereo by Vincent Cunningham, which, first off, if I ever get asked to, and I will never be, but if I ever got asked to write a fucking essay for a Criterion collection, I would just cream my pants. But I feel like that's the ultimate like film critic honor, is to be like, hey, can you write an essay before the Criterion collection? You're like, fuck yes, I can. But then the best part about that is after the essay, it is just a journal from Spike Lee, director's journal by Spike Lee, that from like the beginning of the production till the end. Yeah. And guys, if you're into filmmaking, this is one of the coolest fucking reads you'll have. Like, this is just, it's amazing to see his thought process, to like see what he's doing, like talk about, right here, Radio Raheem treats his box like it's his car, his prized possession. In a way, it is his car. It's how he gets around. He cleans it all the time. And if someone even looks at it the wrong way, that person is in trouble. Like, it is just little things like that where you're like, I fucking love this. Like, it's just like so well thought out.
Love ephemera and just bonus stuff that, again, part of the reason we support physical media so much is, one, preservation, because preservation of art is already a big problem.
And especially in a world where WB's just slashing titles, and they had Do the Right Thing on there, and is it there anymore? Like, you're like, hey, in a world where they're just cutting stuff because they want to save money, because they will always do that. They want to make money. And
literally like erasing full-on productions that existed and were already out just so they can have a tax break on it.
Yeah. Not okay. like not okay. And in that type of world, we need to be really into physical media even more, because this is a work of art and it needs to be preserved as such. So that's why.
And plus, and with this, you get stuff that you don't get on streaming. The big problem with streaming is that it's very scarce as far as like bonus material is concerned. There's never any fucking commentary tracks, I'll tell you that.
Right? Yeah. Nope. That's not a thing. And if it is, it's very like, like small.
Very rare.
Very rare. I mean, one of my favorite things about Criterion is like, here's the description. This other part is just the features. Like, you're like, that's the biggest chunk of text I've ever seen for features ever. Like, you're like, Jesus Christ. One of my favorites on here too Other than that, I did watch the Cannes Film Festival press conference from 1989 with
I watched
a bunch
that too.
of them. Very cool. One of my favorites was they had a first table read where like they were filming as they were introduced. It's so cute. It's like it's the first time the whole cast is together and introducing themselves, and it's like so funny to hear Samuel Jackson being like, "I've been in a few things." You're like, okay, Samuel Jackson. You know, like you're like, all right. And even Esposito being like, I was really interested in this role. You know, like and people just talking about why they wanted to be in this, you know, like, and I think that's so interesting and wonderful. And the other great feature on here is Spike Lee's actual directed music video for Public Enemy's Fight the Power. And then he has with remarks from rapper Chuck D from you know, from
the fact that Fight the Power as a song was like made for this movie.
Right? Insane. Because first off, it's an amazing song. It's a banger all the way through. But also it like kind of encapsulates everything about this movie, you know, like, and that's why I love it, you know, like you're just like, damn, that's why I said earlier, it kind of feels like a musical, because like, even though there's not like songs that they sing or anything like that, Fight the Power is so prevalent in this fucking movie, you know, like you're like, damn, it's the opening number, you hear it multiple times, it's Radio Raheem, you know, like you're just like, damn, holy shit. Like,
it plays again even though the boombox is already destroyed when he hangs up the pictures in the burning restaurant.
Oh man, I fucking love that shot, by the way, of like the flames licking around and and they zoom in on the Malcolm X shot and Martin Luther King. You're like, fuck. You know, like you're like fucking shit, because it's complicated to talk about, but it's like, you know, you have the pacifism of Martin Luther King and this like endless hope of trying to be peaceful, and then you have Malcolm X shaking his hand there, and you know, they were buddies and they talked, and it's like, but Malcolm X was very much like, no, if we gotta fuck him up, we gotta fuck him up. You know, like that's a very simplification of what he said. Don't fucking quote me.
But that dynamic and that like opposing mentality, I mean, prevalent. For one, it's literally kept the X-Men books going for as long as they have. That's literally what the dynamic between Professor X and Magneto is. It's
I know. People are like, why are you politicizing my comics? I'm like, well, you obviously haven't read fucking X-Men in fucking 50 years. Like, goddamn. Yeah. Like, when they're dude, somebody the other day also used the term MCU with me, and I said, what? I literally fucking stopped, and I was like, say that again. And it was somebody that I didn't know well, so I was like, explain what you mean by that. You know, like, explain what you mean by MCU. Like, you're like, fuck you, dude. Like, you're like, we've only just got Miss Marvel and She-Hulk. The first, like, other than Black Widow, which was our only main female character for a very long time.
And you guys wanted that since the first Avengers came out.
They just get upset. It's like they see women on screen and they get fucking upset. Calm the fuck down. Touch some grass, motherfuckers.
Yeah, like, oh my god, I've gotten so fucking sick of like, it's gotten to the point where I've literally muted the word woke on Twitter, because if you're on there,
dude, it's such a like talk about telling on yourself. We say that often on the podcast. Stop telling on yourself. Fucking whenever you say the term woke to me, I'm like, oh no. Like, you know, like you use this term and you don't understand it at all. You know, like you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, you're like, ah, oh, fuck. Like, it is such a big red flag for me whenever somebody uses the term woke. I'm like, somebody did that for Prey. They were like, it wasn't woke. And I'm like, your opinion doesn't matter anymore. Like, I was just like, I was like that you were looking for it to be woke, and then we're like, yeah, it wasn't. You're fucking dumb. You're so fucking dumb. Like,
yeah, just like, oh, I see you're threatened by just the mere existence of a Native American woman.
Or anybody being lifted up. You're like, holy shit. You know, like, you're just like, fuck me, dude. Like, it's like, that was my argument to that guy about the MCU. And I'm like, it's just the biggest company in the world using its power to lift groups up that don't get lifted up. What's wrong with that? You know, like, are you
That, and on the more cynical side, it also gains them more money because they get a
Yes.
wider audience that way.
Yes, they are placating. Like, and I think that that's an important thing to talk about here is that, like, a lot of people are like, oh, Disney's all woke now. And you're like, Disney wouldn't know leftist ideals if it fucking came up and slapped them, you know? Like, it wouldn't fucking, it's like, they're not woke. They're just trying to get in front of a media storm, you know, like they don't want to, it's like, and that's not a bad thing, you know, like it's what companies do all the time with shirts being like, oh, we're sustainable now. And you're like, that wasn't a thing people were mad about for a very long time until they were. And then a lot of companies just got in front of it by being like, oh, no, we're sustainable. Don't worry. We plant trees, you know, like, don't worry about that. And you're like, how are you sustainable? They're like, don't worry about that either. Like, you know, like, do you know the definition of that word? Do you actually do it? Or are you guys just saying you're sustainable, you know, like, but it's like, it's kind of that thing where a smart company knows where the public is going to be mad, you know, like, and upset if they're not pushing things forward, you know, like, it's like, if we can't, it's like we live in a society where there's like, we think we have a democracy, you know, like, and we feel like we have a say in that democracy. We also feel like we have a say in our culture, you know, like, and we get mad about cultural things like Disney movies and fucking sustainable clothes and all these things. Of course, it
would be the do the right thing episode that forces you to use the 4 words "we live in a society," or 5 rather.
We live in a society. Yeah, I know, right? Jesus Christ. Sorry, guys. Sorry to say it. Sorry to fucking say it, but sorry, Sean. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just like further on that point, it is interesting that you get this. There's this great conversation because I don't know if you've heard about that Fidel Castro movie that's coming out. Where where they have James Franco playing Fidel Castro.
And you're like, are you fucking with me, dude? Like,
yeah. Like, even beyond Franco being Franco and all the controversy that lies, like, what the fuck? And John Leguizamo actually had like a great rant about this.
Yes.
Because people tried to come at him when he complained about it. He's just like, well, John, you've played Italian roles before. Where he's just like, that's an exception to the rule. I'm just trying to get parts.
Right.
Like, there's no like army of Hispanic actors trying to steal all the Italian roles, but you won't let us even play ourselves.
Sorry, that'd be actually really funny if there was.
But he also
like,
talks about,
you know, like that straw man argument there. You're like, that would be actually hilarious if that was a fucking thing. The thing you're angry about, if that was real, that would be hilarious. Like,
but he also talks about, like, he hates the idea that, like, oh, movies with white leads get to come out and succeed or fail all the time, but whenever it's someone non-white, it's a risk, so we don't want to do it that often.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, are you kidding me? It's the same thing as Catherine Kennedy coming out with being like, oh, we put an unknown as Han Solo, so that's the reason why it didn't work. And you're like, no, that's not why Solo didn't work. Like, you're like, nope. And it's the same thing as what they did for the trilogy. They're like, oh, we probably shouldn't have done all those no-name actors for the new trilogy. And you're just like, no. That wasn't the problem. That's not the fucking problem. You're like, obviously, because these characters like Poe, Rey, and Finn have lived beyond your trilogy already. You know, like they're already characters beyond that. You know, like beyond just those movies. Like,
it was like the argument, like, pretty much in any female-led superhero film pre-Wonder Woman. It's just like, well, they just don't. Those female-led superhero movies, they just don't work. Every time we try one, they just don't work. It's like, yeah, because they're all bad
and all written by men. Like, you're just like, fuck, dude.
Yeah, and you always try to cheap out on them, and then you wonder why it doesn't work.
You're like, it's weird. It's directed by and written by men, but our female show will not work. You're like, huh? You're like, huh? I wonder if it doesn't speak to the main audience. Like,
you're like, what the fuck?
What the fuck? I know. I really do love. I'll give some credit to She-Hulk. It is full on written by women, directed by women, starring women. You know, like it's like you're like at least give it there. You know, like fuck yes, thank you. Like it's like you know, like you're like damn. Like can we please have a show that's actually by the people that it's supposed to be for? You're like, I might be crazy here. You know, like they might be able to speak to the demographic. I don't know. Like, you know, like you're like, fuck, dude. Like, Jesus Christ. It's the same thing as like all those like Andrew Tate and fucking Spunky or whatever. They always complain that their female audience is only 5%. And you're just like, you know that those women are not, you know, like they're not just not coming to you because they're not watching TV or YouTube videos or something. You know that, right? They're doing it the same amount as anybody else. They're just definitely not watching your misogynistic ass. You know, like you're like, fuck, dude. They're always like, oh, there's only a 5% women audience. You're like, yeah, but it's 50% of the population, motherfucker. You know, like you're like that means they're going somewhere else. It's not. Yeah. It's like it's not that they're not consuming.
It's
like,
just you, bro.
Yeah, it's just you. Like it really is. You're like, damn, fuck, dude. Okay, so beside the point. Back on to Do the Right Thing. One of my I already said Demare was one of my favorite characters, but he's also a great example of a great man. Even the neighborhood knows that he's a great man and he takes care of people. But basically kicked down by society around him. You know, like he talks about like trying to take care of his kids, and then basically he's sad afterward about not being able to take care of his kids that he's drinking, and like and which is a very reasonable response. They actually proved, and I don't know why we had to prove this, that that alcohol deadens the pain of emotions. They found out inside. I read an article this week that they were like did a study. They were like yeah, it takes alcohol takes the sting of emotions off, and you're like
Just
you
like,
didn't
oh,
really
you
need
think?
a fuck yeah. You're like people have been doing this for thousands of years. We needed a fucking science study to tell us it does this. Like what the fuck are you talking about? Like, but it's like it brings a good point to this is that like he's doing a natural response to how bad his life was by society being the shit out of him, you know, like and he's still a good man and doing good things for his community, but everyone looks down on him because he's trying to deal with his pain, you know, like it's another thing of like we need to talk about mental health, you know, instead of being like, oh, this fucking bum, you know, this guy's just drinking all the time on our streets, you know, like you're like maybe we can talk about how this good man was beat the fuck down by everything, you know, and even now is being beaten down, you know, like, and it's like I think he's one of the most interesting characters in the whole movie, you know, like in that aspect where it's just like it's like obviously a good character and everyone just kind of looks at him as a bum, you know, like you're just like damn, like what the fuck.
Especially since it's weird because like he clearly has all his faculties. He's nothing but gracious to everyone.
Yes. And he's nice to everybody, and it's obvious that he's retired. He can't fucking work, so to make money, which, you know, it's like society basically said, no, you ain't getting a fucking retirement fund, fucker. It's like he's trying to just kind of do side jobs, you know, to kind of live his day-to-day life, and like, and everybody fucking hates him for it, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, that's so wild, you know, to me, you know, like, but that's... You know, that's the way people treat people. You know, you're like, damn, fucked up, fucked up. But overall, I think it's kind of, is there any more points in your bullet points you want to go over? I think I'm all out.
Let me see. I think the only other thing was just like talking about how even though Rosie Perez isn't in this movie much, she's great in it. And I was just going to recommend that, like, if you've ever seen her in stuff besides Do the Right Thing, like, a big one as a childhood favorite is The Road to El Dorado, as on the animated side of things. But a really great movie to watch with her, which is probably my favorite performance of hers, is a movie called Fearless with Jeff Bridges in it. It's about a group of people on a plane who think they're going to die as the plane like comes down, and they just sort of accept their deaths, but then they actually survive the accident. And it's all about like shit, I was ready to die, and I was ready to just sort of like welcome it, and I came to terms with it, and now I'm still here, and I don't know what to do.
And now what?
It's a heavy movie, but it's like probably my favorite performance of Jeff Bridges. Like, it's him really sinking his teeth into something dramatic.
That's cool. I'll have to actually watch that. That sounds great. I basically Do the Right Thing, to kind of sum it up. It's so methodical, well thought out, measured story. It's so well done, and really, I don't say this lightly, it's iconic in so many ways. Like, I think we don't realize how often Do the Right Thing is being referenced by other things. That's why I do recommend, like, I know you've probably listened to this whole podcast, you've probably seen the Do the Right Thing, but if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Do the Right Thing yet, I highly recommend this watch.
There's a whole Do the Right Thing style sequence in Chasing Amy.
Yes. Like, right?
The whole, like, shit, Alyssa Jones? I know Alyssa Jones. I mean, I know Alyssa Jones. And just a huge diatribe. It's like shaky cam, and it's just like full on talking to the camera. Like, it's straight out of Do the Right Thing. And Kevin Smith has talked many times about how, like, Do the Right Thing was a big influence on him when he was starting out.
I know a lot of people look to Kevin Smith for breaking the fourth wall, but, like, that's something I didn't bring up here. Spike Lee is the king of fucking breaking the fourth wall here, you know, like with Radio Raheem giving the whole speech to the camera, several other times where people are just looking into the camera talking, you know, and even just
that whole sequence where you just go to different like aspects and you just have everyone just like shouting the racial slurs at camera.
Yes, and that is a wild segment. I love that because it's supposed to be shocking, but it also shows that, like, how we're so quick to be hurtful to each other, you know? Like, we're so quick to come up with these words to fucking hurt each other. It's crazy.
There's a great, like, heavy, like, harrowing sequence in The 25th Hour, which is another Spike Lee film. Oh, yeah. That's a great one. That's one of Edward Norton's best. And he has a similar, like, diatribe, but it's all about, like, how much he fucking hates New York and just wishes it would all burn down. And that was a super controversial sequence because we were still kind of reeling from 9/11. And just to have, like, this hateful speech about, like, I just want this whole fucking city to burn. I want everyone to, like, drown.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like...
And it's, like, it's just, like, right in your face.
I did, yeah, and I think it's important because I think Spike Lee was villainized back then, you know, like as just being, you know, like just you're always yelling or something like that. They used to say about him, and you're like what the fuck.
The Cannes Film Festival like panel that they did, I watched the whole thing. All the questions were very telling.
Yeah.
And all his responses were like very just like measured and poised, but also like no nonsense.
Yes. And I've always loved that about Spike Lee, and it's one of those things that you're just like he will say things even if it's not the fucking time, you know, like it's like the 9/11 stuff. It's like he was obviously hurt by 9/11. He does a few of his directing pieces are about 9/11, you know, like and stuff like that. So it's not something that he was just saying that like I hate New York thing from, you know, like nothing space, you know, of just being like fuck this, you know, like it's very true. It's like, dude, that's the thing about big cities is sometimes it's like they always say like LA chews you up and spits you out. It's like, yeah, New York is more the chewing you up and spitting you the fuck out. Like New York.
And I don't know if that speech was something the movie added, because 25th Hour is based on a book.
Oh,
written by David Benioff, actually, like one of the Game of Thrones showrunners. He was a novelist before.
Really? What the fuck?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, did you watch the first episode of House of Targaryen?
I haven't yet, but people say it's good.
I did watch it. It was pretty good. It's good to be back to like Game of Thrones and this kind of like, you know, this dangerous environment of Game of Thrones and like all the night action. But they are definitely like okay, Game of Thrones is back. Lots of sex, and we're going to kill a baby. You know, like, and you're just like, wait, no, wait. Like, you're just like and
we're back.
We're back, baby. And like, they kind of up the violence in this first episode to really be like, HBO, baby. And like, it's not bad, but it did like it's intense at moments, and you're just like, shit. But it's definitely one of those things that I will say that the like the two main characters, you're like, I hate them, so I'm rooting for the daughter, you know, like, who only wants to ride dragons. You're like, this is the only people I can root for. Okay, all right. You know, you're like,
yeah.
You're like,
and
if
you remember a certain tidbit in like the early seasons of Game of Thrones, you know how her story ends. You're like,
yes, yeah. You're like, no, that is definitely the best part about this show, is like every little thing is just like, you know, you're like, I know what he does. You're like, oh,
but that can work. Like, I think it's much easier to make a prequel work when you know it's just going to be tragic at the end, because you know it's all going to fall apart. Yes. Because you're less about like, well, I know everyone's going to be fine. If you know everyone's not going to be fine, it's going to be worse, because you're like, shit, now I'm going to get attached, and I know this isn't going to end well.
Yeah, I wonder how everyone will react, because it's like Game of Thrones is one of our biggest cultural, like, no, fuck that, we don't talk about Game of Thrones after that bad.
I mean, we say we don't, and yet we keep doing it.
No, I think it's funny that like it was one of those things that like no one wanted to talk about Game of Thrones for literal years here, like almost 3 years since the last episode of Game of Thrones, and then 10 million people watched the House of the Dragon.
Well, here's the thing. I actually want to push back on that, because people are full of shit when they say no one wanted to talk about Game of Thrones, because all they would do is constantly bring up how disappointing it is, which is still talking about it.
Yes.
That and
is all they want.
Sales of the Blu-rays have never gone down. It still gets a shitload of views on HBO. People are, even though they say like it's not worth rewatching.
It tops Sopranos, which and what's the other one that does well? The Wire. The Wire will never slow down. I think some people only watch The Wire every day.
I will never rewatch it because I hated the ending. People are obviously still watching it because the views are still on top. The Blu-rays are doing fine. House of Dragon had a lot of engagement, and almost like, even though it's been a couple years, every couple of weeks I still hear people complaining about the ending or talking about like what went wrong. Just like, you're talking about it because you won't shut up about it, actually.
And I mean, more of a tangent, but I'm actually super down for a Jon Snow series that just like takes place afterward, because like that's one of people's big complaints about, is that Jon Snow got fucked at the end and then they just send him off into the woods, and like that's kind of it. And you're like, yeah, it would put a big band-aid on it to like have a Jon Snow series that is just about him off in the, you know, in the north, you know, like, and you're like, that could work, you know, in trying to save those last episodes, you know, like, I think a lot, it's kind of like the prequels getting band-aided by the Clone Wars, you know, something else has to come to try to band-aid what happens, you know, like, you're just like, because people will tell me all the time,
don't want to be the band-aid, since George R. R. Martin wants to just never write.
Yeah, right. Did you see the title the other day? They were like, I've given up on giving people dates for when I'm going to be finished. You're like, of course you did. Of course you did. Like, of course you're just giving up on it. Like, fuck.
From Logan Lucky's just going to keep getting funnier the longer he takes.
Yeah, right.
That whole fucking scene in the prison where it's just like, where the fuck is the Winds of Winter? He was supposed to have it done years ago.
Oh, it's so fucking funny. It's just getting out of control.
Well, we're way off topic.
We are way off topic. But, okay, do the right thing. Go watch it. This absolutely deserves to be on AFI's top 100 list. It's absolutely in at least my top 50. Could be top 25 movies of all time. I absolutely, no question. For better or for worse, it's almost timeless. Yes. Yeah. That's also my other feeling, is that I watch this and I'm like, God damn, this is so old, and it still somehow is exactly about this moment, you know, like about these past couple of years. You're like, Jesus Christ, like, you know, you're like, fuck. Yeah,
I like
right.
to describe that as my externalized internal scream.
Yeah, just letting out the constant scream that's in your head. You're like, I'm just gonna let it out for a second there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're just like, it's okay. That's always there. Don't worry about it. Like,
Yep.
But Do the Right Thing, fantastic. Can't recommend the Criterion Collection enough. Like, this is a work of art in a Blu-ray set. You know, like you're like, damn, son. It's hard to rate this type of movie too. It's like one of those things that I had to give it a 9, no question, because it is just so well done. But that doesn't really matter. What really matters is that it's timeless. Is that like you can always watch this, you know, like, and
this is why
this
is why like in recent years I've like mostly like steered away from like numbered ratings a lot lately, because it's one of those things where like it just because, especially as you become like more nuanced and observant, it's kind of hard to quantify art that way.
Yeah, because it's like it. Yeah, no, it really is. It's right, because it's almost demeaning to the art to be like, wow, this great work of art that has touched so many millions of lives. An 8 out of 10, you know, or a 9 out of 10, you know, like, and then all people hear is, oh, it wasn't perfect, you know, or like,
yeah, that's another
thing. It wasn't a 9 or it wasn't a 10, you know, like, it's like people get
and it's
so
also that like
up.
It's also that binary of like, if it's either amazing or it's not worth my time.
Yeah, and you're just like,
it's just like, oh, you gave it a 7, it must not be that good then. Anything less than an 8 isn't worth it.
And really, my scoring system is 7 is watch that, you know, like 8 is like, oh my God, please go see that. And 9 is like absolutely essential watching. And 10 is like, if you haven't seen it, what the fuck are you up to? But like 7 to me is so, and I know when you do a grade system, which is not how this is supposed to work, but when you do a grade system, that's only a C, you know, like, and you're like, no, in my mind, a 70 is like, or 7 is very much like, hey, you can totally watch this. This is gonna be fun, you know, like nothing offensive, you know, like, and plus nothing upsetting, you know, like.
Plus, the American education system might not be the best model to continually compare to either.
Yup. Yes. I mean, a little aside to that. Did you see that Florida pulled the Starship Troopers and started hiring veterans as teachers because they're so down on teachers, and they're just they don't have to get teaching licenses, they don't have to do any training, they're just veterans, so they can do it. That's straight out of Starship Troopers. Why does my dystopian fiction have to come true? Fuck no! Stop this.
You want to talk about an interesting gap in adaptation? It's Starship Troopers, because Starship Troopers is actually drinking the Kool-Aid in the book, and then the adaptation of it is almost making fun of the book, which is kind of great.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. I keep being like, Mary, you will love Starship Troopers. It is such like a fuck you fascists type of thing.
Yeah.
And I fucking love that. I fucking love that. But besides the point, Starship Troopers not even on this list, which is kind of upsetting.
Kind of disgusting, actually.
Kind
Where's the Criterion Collection Starship Troopers?
Give it to
me. Get that going.
I want it next month, Criterion. Make it happen. But guys, that is I believe number 96. Number 96, Do the Right Thing, on the AFI Top 100 list. It was great talking about it today. Go check out our other AFI ones. We've done Blade Runner, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Toy Story, and Ben-Hur, which Ben-Hur is still our most watched episode. I don't understand. But people want that Christian content, I guess.
People love that Christian fanfic.
But our next one, which will not be the next episode, we'll build up to it. But we're doing The Last Picture Show from 1971, which is something I actually haven't seen before. So I'm actually really excited to watch it for the first time. And then Pulp Fiction after that. Some more Samuel L. Jackson after that one.
Can't keep him away for too long.
There's some of my favorite movies coming up, actually, and I'm kind of upset they're in the 90s of this list. I'm like, you fuck with me? Goodfellas is 92. Get the fuck out of here. Like, it's just like, no, Goodfellas is top 10 at most. Like, but that's my personal. That's not.
Is that the Italian in you just being like, what the fuck?
What the fuck? You gonna disrespect us like this? God damn. You're like, did you see the jail scene where they cooked the pasta? That's the most Italian scene in all of cinema. Like, it's just them cutting the onions with a razor blade. You're like, oh, that's so Italian. Like,
I literally have seen people do that because I've seen Goodfellas.
Shit cracks me up. You're like, okay, all right, Martin Scorsese.
Just like, guys, garlic doesn't actually liquefy. That's not how it works. But slicing it thinly does help.
It does help. You know, it's not wrong. It's just wild. But guys, thank you so much for for listening to this episode, and for checking out the Warp Shelf podcast. Check out other episodes. We are going bi-weekly with these episodes because we want to do more this, where we have notes, where we're not getting as lost. Well, we'll go on tangents,
we're not like scrambling.
I want a more prepared project for you guys, basically. And so hopefully you guys will enjoy the bi-weekly schedule coming out. Maybe you won't have to like rush to get through a bunch of episodes. It can be, you know, like, oh, I have a week to listen to this episode, and then another week to listen to the episode. That's what I'm thinking. You know, like, you got some time to listen, you know, before the next one comes out. But don't worry. If you're really like, what the fuck, where's my weekly Warp Shelf, we are going to be doing other things. Do not worry. We are talking about different formats for the Filthy Casuals, and we have other projects coming up. So please don't be like, oh, they're changing the show a ton. No, we are not. We are just trying to be very focused and help you guys out by doing a better show.
Because I feel like the last few, basically as soon as we started doing the AFI stuff, I feel like we really started to come prepared. Like, I'm still super proud of the way the Blade Runner one turned out.
Yeah.
Because I had like all the notes, and plus like we had like sort of like different opinions on it, and like that just made it more engaging.
Right. I think it works. And I hope that you guys found Do the Right Thing today talk engaging. Thank you guys for listening to the episode. Please support us on our website, galaxygeek.com, where all the episodes live, but we're also on every podcast platform. And if you want to see our beautiful faces and our warp shelves, you can watch us on YouTube and check us out on there. And, you know, do the algorithm thing. Hit buttons below, basically. You know, it doesn't matter which order you hit them in. You know, a lot of people will say comment, follow, subscribe, you know, whatever. Doesn't matter what order, just do them in some order. And guys, if you want to check out our personal Instagram and Twitter, you can check me out on there as Yep Frank.
Mod Karaika, mostly nerd stuff. I just realized I actually like went to Fan Expo Boston and haven't posted anything about it.
I was only
because I think it was only because I got sick right after, as you know, so I just kind of forgot.
I know. This is we put off doing these episodes. We had a summer break, but then we were going to come back earlier, and I got COVID, and COVID brain is real. So I apologize if there's any moment here where I'm just looking and sounding dumb.
So you actually got it, huh?
Yeah, no, it's like it really was. It was like straight up COVID, and it was like, it was bad. It was rough. We're on day 12 now, though, and I'm feeling a lot better. My brain's starting to come back, but like those first couple days, I was just like laying on the ground moaning.
I'm actually not sure whether what I had, because you seem to have like very similar symptoms that I did, except I really got fucked up. Yeah. But I also couldn't tell if it was the flu or like bronchitis, because I've had sicknesses like this before. And I do have a home COVID test right behind me. I just never ended up using it.
I was just like, the minute I felt bad, I was like, gotta find out, you know, like what it is. And so that way I don't infect more people. You know, like,
I think it's just mostly me being cheap because these fucking things are expensive. So it's just like,
well, you're supposed to be able to go to a pharmacy and get for free, but, and you can sign up on Joe will send you some free ones. But, you know, once those are up, of course, they're expensive as fuck. No question. Like, they ain't cheap. But guys, just so you know, you get your COVID test for free. You don't have to.
But hey, if you got it, that means you got them antibodies in your system now.
That was the funny thing to me. I literally saw my COVID shot card, and it said that I was coming up on my 6 months. Like, literally, September was going to be my 6 months to get another booster, and guess not. You know, like, I guess I'm okay for a little bit now. Like, I guess I'm immune, like, for a bit. But yeah, so hopefully I'll wait a bit and then get my other booster, because there's no point getting it right now. But I don't think it'll do anything. Like, but guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you for being patient with us for our little summer break there, but hopefully you had a good summer. And now school's in session. We have some Warp Shelf for you. So thank you all for listening in, supporting the show, and supporting us during this break. We had a bunch of listens during this break, and I was like, what you all up to? Catching up on episodes? I love it. Like, you're like, hell yeah. Like, you're like, yeah, check out the other episodes while you were waiting for the new ones. That sounds
There's a
great.
bunch of people just like, yo, have you listened to this Ben-Hur episode, dude?
I do say that's some of our best jokes in that episode.
Yeah.
Maybe the most hilarious we've been in the show. Like, it's pretty fucking funny. But guys, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you next time.